So first of all, thank you, Alper, for joining us. We really appreciate you spending some time with us just to share some thoughts about the investment scene in the security industry right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to join.
First of all, can you maybe talk a bit about some M&A activity during the pandemic and how that compared to maybe what was going on in the years previous and what we can expect for maybe 2022 and the years to come?
Sure. So specific to security, M&A during the pandemic was actually quite robust. If you look at the last, I'll call it 3 years, effectively sort of end of 19 or 2.5 years into 19 through where we are today, we've seen more activity than in any point in recent history, which is maybe at times surprising, but not really when you think about a couple of factors. One is, generally speaking, M&A activity has been quite robust. So it's, the trend in the industry has followed the trend in the overall market. And then secondly, security has always been considered a counter-cyclical, highly resilient market. And anytime there are signs of softness in the market or concerns about growth or future expectations, and there's a flight to safe areas or areas where you see a high degree of cash flow stability, security is at the top of the list typically for investors. So given what has happened during the pandemic, government subsidies and propping up of economies aside, obviously there have been some challenging spots and concerns related to long-term growth in the marketplace, and as a result, security has been an area where folks have over-indexed their attention. I would say investors have over-indexed their attention, and you've seen that in the volume of transactions. You've also seen that in the valuations for transactions. So it's been quite robust. And just to give you some empirical data, so Raymond James, our security and safety team, which were among the most active in the market, but we did 15 transactions in the course of 2021. That's a record by far. We typically do in any given year 6 to 8 transactions, and so just as a data point, that's indicative, I think, of the incremental level of activity we've seen. And heading into 22, to answer that part of the question, our pipeline, our backlog of active transactions and pipeline of opportunities where we see a high probability of something occurring in 22 was as high as ever. So despite the fact that we had record activity in 21, that we didn't necessarily drain the swamp, so to speak, and not have anything to work on as we got into 22, and 22 started off quite robustly for us, and we expect it to continue. We don't see any signs of abatement in terms of overall market activity, or in terms of what we see as the likelihood of transactions getting done in the security and safety industries in 22.
Thank you. Did the pandemic itself, or the broader macroeconomic factors going on during the pandemic, did that have any sort of direct impact on what was going on in terms of investment or M&A in security?
Well, aside from what I just described, which is this sort of move into what more safe area as it relates to sort of investments, which security and safety is perceived to be, I would tell you that there were certain sectors within the industry that got a lot of interest just by virtue of what happened in the pandemic. One great example is businesses that are involved in providing perimeter security. So video surveillance type businesses or others that I can speak to, but generally speaking, anybody that provided security to assets that reside outside, for example, or high value assets that reside outside, those businesses got a nice uplift because there was no one on site, yet those assets still remained on site for long periods of time, and naturally, business owners or whomever was responsible for those assets needed to ensure that they were protected and that the value didn't erode. So as a result, a number of companies in that space got a very nice uplift, and in terms of their overall level of activity, demand for their services or products, and that translated into a lot of interest, I think, on the part of investors for those types of businesses. On the flip side of that, systems integrators, for example, during the first half of 2021, had it pretty rough because the sites that they would typically go into to either install new equipment or retrofit were closed. And so as a result, they weren't really able to go deliver the services that they typically do. And so for the first half of 21, first half of 20 was not surprisingly pretty challenging for them. But then as conditions started to, as we got a better handle on COVID and conditions started to at least improve a bit, although we've sort of seen this ups and downs. But the opening up process really changed their trajectories. In the second half of 20 was very strong for those businesses, and they more than made up for some of the slowness in activity in the first half. And so overall, you saw places where the industry was affected, and even where it was affected, you saw a very nice rebound in those markets. And then certain markets, like I said, like the example of perimeter security, just had a tremendous, sort of run up as a result of what they do and how it played into the overall COVID story.
Okay. Aside from monitoring or access control, perimeter protection, are there any technologies, regardless of the pandemic, that are considered hot just in terms of their appeal to the market?
Certainly. I mean, I will, you said aside from, but I'm going to emphasize one of them, which is access control. Access control is arguably the most active segment of the market from a transactional perspective, be it capital formation or M&A. And a big reason for that is you're seeing, call it next generation companies coming into the industry, introducing, technologically advanced solutions like cloud architecture. And there's a very large installed base of call it old access control technology, which is now in the process of being changed out. And so as a result, you're seeing those companies, as well as others who are more incumbents, really getting a lot of demand driven initiatives to come in and essentially deploy their products, deploy their services. And so that's an area where you're seeing a ton of activity. And then the other part of that is businesses that are providing more of a managed service. So rather than just deploying a product, you're wrapping around a service around that product installation and essentially providing the full capability set and soup to nuts management of that site. And so the managed services model has been another key catalyst for activity in the industry. Companies that have really transitioned their business models from more of a product sale or just as simply a software sale have now moved it over to that subscription-based recurring model, have created greater attachment with their customers, more service that they're providing, and therefore more longevity to their, to those customer relationships. So, cloud architecture certainly is affecting the industry. This business model shift is certainly affecting the industry, as well as I said, so certain segments are just benefiting from where they are in their technological or product evolutionary cycles.
Okay. In terms of investment, are we seeing any more interest in investors coming from outside the industry, be they telcos or other industries?
A bit. We have seen investors who I'll call them more like industrial conglomerates. For example, one is an Amatec that bought a business called Tellular a couple of years ago now, who's come into the space, not necessarily a household name in security, but someone who saw the fundamentals in a security related business and got attracted to adding it to its broader portfolio. What I will say though is, aside from moreover, in terms of new entrants, some of the incumbents who are fairly dormant over the course of the last 5 years, strategic parties who are fairly dormant over the last 5 years, have become substantially more active. Not only in terms of just transaction activity, but just thinking strategically about their growth profiles and the needs related to those growth profiles and how to fill those in with M&A. So we're having a lot of conversations with the largest market participants around the world about their strategies and how they would intend to fill in the gaps. And then in addition to that, you have seen some large transactions, for example, like the Securitas acquisition of Stanley's security business, that just further evidences what I'm saying related to the increased level of activity, heightened degree of awareness around the large companies in the space who are more and more active. So that combined with some new entrants in the industry, I think is giving us a lot of confidence that this is not simply a private equity driven increase in activity, which is where what you've seen in many other industries, but this is driven more on a balanced basis by both private equity and the global strategics.
Great. Well, thank you, Alper. We appreciate you taking some time to share your thoughts on investments in the security market. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to join.